report. I'm reporting directly from downtown Detroit, and we are on holy ground for the Motor City. I'm standing here in the parking lot of the Broadway, the iconic men's clothier, where 30 years ago, this month, you had one of the most historic gangland murders in Detroit history with the assassination of Demetrius Holloway here at the Broadway. And really the murder of Holloway on October 8, 1990 really spelled the end of the decadent, destructive crack era in the D. Really put a wrecking ball through this city from the early 80s until 1990-91 with Holloway's assassination. Demetrius Holloway was the biggest drug kingpin in Detroit. Took the city by storm when he came out of prison in 1985. He had served 5 years in prison, came out in 85, and within 6 months he had pretty much taken over the city, had become the biggest wholesale cocaine dealer at the time. He lived lavishly, was someone that preferred three-piece suits to jogging suits, diamond pinky rings to gold chains, rope chains around his neck. He was really a force of nature, someone that was equally good at legitimate business as he was in the dope game. So the end of Demetrius Holloway happened here at the Broadway. I'm standing in the parking lot. Again, this is holy ground. I mean, every major baller in the history of Detroit, pretty much from the 60s forward, was coming to the Broadway to shop for their clothes. Just recently shut down, but definitely probably the signature moment of the Broadway in terms of pop culture is the fact that Demetrius Holloway met his end here on October 8, 1990. And he was murdered while he was in the store shopping for a pair of Polo Ralph Lauren socks, and he was murdered by the two Milton brothers, Lester Little Les Melton and his brother Tommy Toe Tag Milton. Tommy Toe Tag was the getaway driver. He parked his BMW right about here in the late afternoon of October 8th, and if you walk with me, you can see where Little Les got out of the car and then came across on Randolph Street to the front of the Broadway and walked into the store, came up behind Demetrius Holloway, put 3 in the back of his head, and according to gangland lore, snapped his fingers, said, "Got him," and then whistled his way out of the store into his brother's BMW, and his brother whisked him away down Randolph. Eventually, they would both be indicted and convicted about 10 years later. The real question is, where did the murder come from? Where did the contract come from? Because the Milton brothers were pretty low-level players. They wouldn't have done this on their own. So, one of these lasting mysteries in the history of Detroit gangland lore is, where did the order come from to kill Demetrius Holloway? There are 3 or 4 theories that have been bandied about over the last 30 years. One of those theories is that it came from his former enforcement unit, the Best Friends. The 4 Brown brothers started the Best Friends, which was a group that existed within the Holloway organization for muscle and murder for hire. And then eventually they wanted to go off by themselves and start their own wholesale operation, which put them at odds with their former boss, Holloway. 2 of the Brown brothers were murdered in December '86, which ignited a war between Holloway and the Brown brothers. At the same time, he was also in a conflict with the Black Ed Hansard organization. Black Ed was an East Side dope kingpin that was beefing with Demetrius Holloway's right-hand man and best friend, Maserati Rick Carter. Maserati Rick Carter murder is also incredibly infamous in the history of Detroit. He was murdered in his hospital bed in the emergency room intensive care unit at Mount Carmel in 1988, which led to Holloway getting out of town, staging his own kidnapping so he could lay low while the heat came down pretty heavy, both from law enforcement and the street. Staged his own kidnapping in front of a hamburger stand in the weeks after Maserati Rick was murdered. But by 1990, Demetrius Holloway was back in the D and doing business. So could have come from the Best Friends, could have come from Black Ed Hansard. Another group that people have speculated was a group of childhood friends of Demetrius Holloway. Demetrius Holloway and all the dope kingpins of the 1980s, when they were teenagers in the 70s, they came up as kind of the JV Mafia for the Murder Row crew, which was the most prominent black organized crime group of the 1970s under the leadership of Big Frank Nitty Usher, and Adolf Doc Holliday Powell. And those young wannabe gangsters in the 70s became full-blooded, full-fledged kingpins in the 80s. A portion of that group, of that JV Mafia group, was in prison and helped Demetrius Holloway get on his feet in 1985 and start moving weight. That group was led by a guy by the name of Wayman World Benji Kincaid, the #1 shot caller in the Michigan Department of Corrections for all non-Muslim African Americans. Has been in prison since 1976 and is a powerhouse behind bars. He knew Holloway from when they were teenagers and helped Holloway get started in the crack game in 1985. By 1988-89, World Benji, they called him World because he controlled the whole prison world. And World Benji Kincaid wanted a piece, allegedly, of Demetrius Holloway's business, and Holloway wasn't willing to give that piece to Benji Atkins. So there is some belief that the Milton brothers, who had other connections to Benji Atkins, had done some muscle work on the street for Atkins with some extortion conspiracies, possibly got the contract from the World Benji crew. Another theory is that it came from the Monster Squad, which was the enforcement unit that worked under Demetrius Holloway after the best friends had left and gone off on their own. The Monster Squad was led by Cliff Jones, who succeeded Demetrius Holloway as head of the Holloway organization for 3 or 4 years before he got locked up in '94. So it's still a mystery 30 years later where that murder contract came from, but we know the Milton brothers were the culprits. They were the triggermen in the Demetrius Holloway assassination. It happened here 30 years ago at the corner of Gratiot and Randolph, right by Greektown, outside the Broadway. Again, an iconic men's clothier that just recently shut down. It will always live in infamy in Motor City history as the Broadway being the last stand of Demetrius Holloway. Really, the first Big Meech. Everyone knows about Big Meech with Black Mafia family. He might be the real Big Meech, but the first Big Meech was Demetrius Holloway. I'm Scott Bernstein from Gangster Report. Check back for some more videos coming up real soon.